Another strategy could be to offer free consultations and workshops. Education is, helps the giver learn their product even better, and it helps to generate leads for the business, right? And so, whether it's, something for anything from immigration law, how to, I'm Canadian, right? So how to do maybe how to set up a business across the border, or maybe it's trip and fall law, or maybe it's, harassment and stuff like that, which is pretty common nowadays. Do workshops on that, which allow the clients to experience what kind of value you provide.
If you're an attorney in the pursuit of a successful law practice, fulfilling career, and the life of your dreams, this podcast has it all. Behind the Bench gives you great tools to overcome the unique challenges you face every day as a law firm owner. Welcome to Behind the Bench podcast with your host, Josh Konigsberg, author, partner, and co-founder of Law Firm Marketing Pros and lifelong entrepreneur.
Welcome to another captivating episode of Behind the Bench podcast. This is your host, Josh Konigsberg, and as many of you know, I'm a digital marketing expert specializing in helping lawyers generate more qualified leads online and thus enhance their law firm revenues. Join us as we explore the fascinating realm of law, featuring insightful discussions, seasoned lawyers, legal experts, and industry leaders. Special thank you to our sponsor, Law Firm Marketing Pros. They get you more leads, more clients, and more profits. Our guest today is Glenn Poulos. He's an author, speaker, and sales expert. He's written a book. I love the title. It's over his shoulder, Never Sit in the Lobby. Glenn, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Josh. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Love the title of the book. I actually listened to some of your other podcasts, and we'll talk about the title in just a minute. But can you share a brief overview of your entrepreneurial journey and the business that you've founded and been involved with?
Sure. Yeah. So I started I graduated college in 82, and I got a job with the federal government. I was an electronic technician, a technical job, fixing stuff, and actually traveled up to the Arctic working on weather stations. And it was a fun time at in my early 20s. But after a couple years of working, in a civil service sort of environment, my boss pulled me aside one day and said, you should be in sales. And so I took him up on his idea, and I quit my government job, and I went and got a job in sales. It was technical sales, which was, sort of, related to my background and selling equipment that I was sort of using day to day. But now I was on the other side selling it to engineers and technicians and the like, right? So I did that for about 5 years, and I realized that, there's a bit more leverage when you own the business than when you work in the business, right? So as a salesman, I have leverage in that, the more people I can visit, the more I can sell, selling higher ticket items. But then I realized, like, if I could own a business, then I would get pieces of what I sold and what everyone else in the business sold, right? And so after about 5 years, I quit and started my first company doing a similar, selling a similar kind of product. I'd actually approached the owners about letting me spin off a division to focus on a newfangled technology that I said was going to be hyper successful, and they could own a piece of it, and I would then get my chance to be an entrepreneur. And they turned me down. So I basically, the next day I actually turned in my resignation and I quit. And the newfangled technology that they told me the business would never work was based on the cell phone, right? And of course, that never went anywhere, right? And who needs a cell phone, right? And so I ran that business till the early 2000s. I sold that business. And then after a couple of years after that, I started a new business in a similar but slightly different field, even more focused, but in the telecom space, selling equipment. And I ran that for 15 years. And that pulls me now to 2022, February. And I sold that in February 2022 to private equity. And I agreed to work for them. And I'm actually now an employee again after all these years, 30 years later. I now have a job, 9 to 5 with a boss, a bunch of bosses. and board of directors and what have you, and I'm helping them to to grow the private equity group of companies that they've bought, one of which was mine, right? And that brings me to today, and now I'm driving sales for a telecom company called NWS.
So that takes you into, obviously, as your journey as an entrepreneur, but then how do you transition that into sales coaching, and how do you have time today to be a sales coach?
Yeah, so I don't do that full time, but I do, probably half a dozen times a year, I'll work with one company, and it has to be the right fit for me. Like usually what I'm helping people do is rejig their sales teams and sales marketing, and I do have a significant background in running the operations and the finances, but that's not really where my real skills lie. It's more in designing a proper approach to sales, the right sales team structure, management, compensation, stuff like that. And so I kind of just squeeze it in with my day job, and it's my sort of a little bit of plan B, a little bit of maybe later kind of a thing, and I'm trying to build a bit of a name. And I didn't really want to, it wasn't something that I want to pull the plug on my normal 9-to-5 kind of experience and go full into it full time. But I do enjoy working with, different kinds of companies. And, and I've worked with 2 or 3 this year, and, and that's sort of enough, you know what I mean, for me. And,
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right, great. So you wrote this book. It's Never Sit in the Lobby. Love the title. Can you tell us a little bit about tell us about the title, how you came up with it, and then talk about some of the strategies and principles that you discuss in the book.
Yeah. So I guess the title that I came up with was boring and wasn't going to work. And the editor shot it down the first. It was a lady the first time she looked at it. She said, "That'll never work." I'm like, "Why?" And she's like, "Well, it's awful for Amazon, and nobody will search for that." I don't even remember what it was now, to be honest. But I was all set that I'd come up with this great title. It was like Sales Factors or something, and because I call all my rules factors, right? And I name them after people. But it was the editor that actually suggested I pick one of my golden rules, which is never sit in the lobby, right? And so. I often get people that react a little strangely. Sometimes they're saying, "Well, what do you mean never sit in the lobby? Should I sit in my car?" And I'm like, "No, you should stand in the lobby. You should be waiting for the customer to walk in the door or, walk in the lobby, right? And be ready. Don't be on your phone. Don't be sitting down, flipping through magazines and distracted." And I learned that, from visiting clients and finding out that, some guy would walk in and I would be kind of, dazed out, looking at my stuff or looking at stuff on the wall. And they're like, "Are you Glenn or whatever?" Right. And I always found that it was better to be standing up so I could sort of meet them at their own level than having to rise up from a chair, put things down. And it just became a golden rule. Right. And it was a catchy thing for the title. And it didn't take me long to warm up to it. Right. And so that's how I came up with the title. And, in the beginning of the book, that part comes out fairly early, and there's kind of a little group of rules that go around that never sit in the lobby, right?
So for attorneys,
yeah,
what strategies can they gather from your book, or what can you offer up an attorney, because they're not sitting in the lobby, their client's sitting in the lobby?
Right. So that, you kind of have to like think of like, how can I adapt this to me, right? And so, one of my golden rules that comes up at the beginning of the book, is never fax the facts and never ship the shit, right? And so, because we were always selling things, right? And so whenever you have an opportunity to visit the client, customer, or whoever's paying you, right? Like, because if these are attorneys, they're probably presenting people with, important documents or important proposals, or it depends on what kind of attorney they are, I guess, right? So they say, "How does this apply to me?" And I say, "Well, look, if this is a really important proposal you're doing, do it in person, right? If at all possible. Obviously, nowadays, if they're in San Francisco and you're in New York, obviously you're not going to be doing that. But when it's possible, try to do things so you can establish face-to-face rapport with a client. And that doesn't matter whether you're selling legal services, insurance, it doesn't matter, whatever, right? I mean, I sold products that plugged in the wall and made measurements, but I mean, it really does boil down to the same thing. Now, and also, let's say you can't visit the client, then I would also try to like create environments where I was maybe using the power of Zoom or Teams or something to have kind of a face-to-face, expose on whatever you're presenting, right? Like, I'm going to send you the documents with a Zoom link here. We'll crack the document. I'll walk you through it so you can get a reaction, right? And so that, because in 2024, after the pandemic, I mean, there's all sorts of weird, changes where some clients don't even let you visit them anymore, right? And so, again, trying to establish that face-to-face, bond so you can build rapport with them, right?
And then for personal injury, that happens. They'll have to go to the hospital and visit a client that's been severely injured,
right?
Or maybe to their home. It also happens with criminal defense, where they have to go down to the jail, unfortunately, right?
Right. Yeah, I hear you. And so there's a second rule, which is, never fax the facts. Sorry for the expletive on your podcast, but, that was the way I've always said it, right? Never fax the facts, because I started in 1980, right, when we had a fax machine. And now, of course, it's never email the faxes, really, but it doesn't flow off the tongue as good, right?
Yeah.
And never ship the shit, meaning... And so, and so after that rule, my next rule is when you go there, always show up with something in your hand and something in your mind, right? And again, this is just a rule that I created over time. I learned from good salespeople, and I realized that when you have something to give them and something to tell them, it becomes more powerful than just showing up and starting rambling on, right? And so now that might be the retainer kind of proposal kind of document. It might be, if somebody's injured or whatever, it might be some kind of a token of get well or whatever, right? I mean, I'm just thinking about somebody showing up at the hospital, like maybe you should show up with flowers, but something in your hand, right? And it doesn't need to be expensive. Like we often give away pens and screwdrivers and mouse pads and water bottles and baseball caps and golf balls. And so oftentimes it's that, but most of the time it says, hey, can I get a quote on such and such, right? I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm actually visiting someone else in your building this week, next week, whatever's appropriate. Can I drop it off? And a lot of times they're like, no, just send it over, and I'm too busy. And I'm like, no problem. I said, I'm going to be there anyways. Why don't I just leave it in the lobby for you, right? And they're like, no problem. Leave it in the lobby. So then when that time rolls around and I'm there, and I know I have that reason to be there, then I try to stack up other people in that building that I can talk to the same day. Sure. Then I'll call the guy from the lobby and I'll say, hey, I'm in the lobby. I've got that proposal that you wanted. He forgot that a week ago he told me he was too busy, right? And because of, human nature, he'll come 99% of the time, they'll come down. And now I have something in my hand, something in my mind. I want to talk to him about the document, proposal, offer, or whatever. I hand it to him and I say, hey, what do you think? Have a quick look at it. And the
call would go something like, I'm standing in the lobby.
Exactly. I'm standing in your lobby and I've got your stuff. And or the receptionist, which is where I love this part, right? Where the receptionist says to me, is he expecting you? Like, because they always ask you, like, sort of like they're the FBI or something, or like, your Secret Service, right? Is he expecting you? And I'm like, oh, yeah, he's expecting me. He asked me to bring him a quote, right? And she's like, oh, okay. And then she dials him up. She says, oh, Glenn's in the lobby. And, and he forgot, like I said, he usually forgets that he told me he was too busy and he comes down. The odd time you just leave it and what have you. And then there's another one, which again, as a lawyer, you probably have to be a little bit creative, but how you apply it literally. But I have this other rule called always ask for a mini tour, right? And so a mini tour, people are like, what's a mini tour, Glenn? Like, I go, well, that's a tour that's mini, meaning it doesn't take all afternoon. It's not 4 hours long, 80-degree weather, getting on and off a bus, driving around Miami, looking at the sights. It's a small little look at whatever we're here to talk about today, right? So, So perhaps, I mean, and this might be inappropriate, or maybe there's a broken leg or a trip and fall guy or whatever. Like, hey, can you show me, give me a little mini tour of what's happened here, right? Like, tell me, and at least you're going to get a look at, at the situation. I mean, may not show you his leg or broken leg or whatever, but I mean, what you want to do is get past the front door and into the world where the business is going to be taken. And so, by that, because you want to have a look around to see if there's people wearing T-shirts from your competitor, right? Or coffee mugs from the legal firm down the road that you compete with, or mouse pads or other things, or other indications, artifacts that show you what this business does. Because most of the time, this is a new client for you. They've got there somehow. They're not using you, so they're using someone else. And you can figure out, hey, am I just there to keep the real guy honest, or is this a genuine? And so getting a look inside their, getting into their boardroom, getting behind that front door can be an important step, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
How have your personal experiences as an entrepreneur and business owner shaped your approach to coaching others in sales?
Well, of course, I'm 62 now, right? So I've had a lot of experiences, right? Some good, some bad, right? Lots of challenges at work. I've gone all the way to the brink of disaster and come back. And in one case, I had I did have a business that failed and came back from that and even stronger, right? And my experience really taught me that resilience and adaptability are crucial, and I faced lots of challenges and setbacks. And every one of them sort of taught me a valuable lesson that now I can sort of pass on to others. Like, it's not a linear progression, to fame, fortune, and riches, right? It's a very, very rough road. And I mean, obviously they always say, like the journey is the destination kind of thing or whatever. Like that's what life's all about, right? And, and understanding the practical realities of running a business, has allowed me to offer advice that's not only theoretical, but it's grounded in real world experiences, right? And
so can you provide some specific examples of successful sales techniques or strategies that have worked for you or for clients that you've coached?
Yeah. So, well, I can give you one right off the top of my head. I'm going to give you one that may be a little bit entertaining as well. So, obviously one effective technique is to use, client testimonials and case studies and things like that. That provides the social proof and credibility that a lawyer would need, or any kind of professional services person would need. Like I worked with this lawyer and they got me a good settlement. They got me a good result, fair and equitable, et cetera. Right. Another strategy could be to offer free consultations and workshops. Education is, helps the giver learn their product even better, and it helps to generate leads for the business, right? And so, whether it's, something for anything from immigration law, how to, I'm Canadian, right? So how to do maybe how to set up a business across the border, or maybe it's trip and fall law, or maybe it's, harassment and stuff like that, which is pretty common nowadays. Do workshops on that, which allow the clients to experience what kind of value you provide firsthand and get a sense of, and always, I guess the other thing would be, the importance of following up, right? Consistent, meaningful follow-ups will make a significant difference in closing deals. And what you find is that a lot of people, like, they only give a half-hearted approach to following up, and it really is a plague, that I find in really trying to get people to give their head a shake and say, like, okay, well, did you follow up? And I have a little kind of little play that I go with, like, oh, hey, what happened? What's going on with that deal, right? And he's like, oh, well, I sent him a quote, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, did you drop it off? And because of course I never fax the facts, right? I go, did you drop it off? And he's like, well, no. I emailed it to him, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, did he reply? And I'm like, no. He's like, no. And I'm like, okay. And so no comment back. Okay, well, then what did you do next, right? And he's like, oh, well, I phoned him. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what did he say? He goes, well, he didn't answer. I'm like, oh, well, what happened then? He goes, well, I left a voicemail, right? And I'm like, okay, so this guy wanted a proposal for $80,000 solution or whatever, which you faxed, didn't drop off, guy didn't reply to the email, then you phone him and he didn't call you back. So, I mean, where's the follow-up in that, right? Like, you need it, this is why you don't fax the fax. This is what, and so the follow-up is so important, right? And
magic number is 12.
Right. Yeah. And so, and the other thing that I was sort of alluding to, something sort of funny or was, one of the most effective techniques is in the book called the tenacious takeaway, right? Where you realize that the customer is somewhat aligned with a different brand of any kind of sort, right? Like, maybe you've been given a lead, but obviously you're not the incumbent provider of said service, and clearly they've got the service from someone else up to that point. And you're kind of talking to them and they're giving you this little bit of kind of attitude, like, and it's not directly, they're not saying like, oh, we use, Williams and Sons for 30 years and but their body language is telling you that they're saying that, right? And their boss probably said, look, we're maybe, you need to shop this around. Let's get some fresh blood in here to see what sort of pricing we can get or whatever. And you're trying to give a presentation and they won't, you can tell that they're really not resonating. You're not resonating with them and they're not listening, right? So the tenacious takeaway is where in the middle of it, you just stop and say, look, I can tell that we're not really a right fit for you. I don't seem to be resonating with you. So I'm just going to get going and, good luck to you and whatever, right? Now, obviously you need to, in the context of the business you're in, figure out how to say that quasi nicely, but you really need to just take yourself away. And they're like, wait a minute, why are you suddenly walking out of the room? Like, because I'm not going to stick around so you can tell your boss you talked to a guy and it's no good and let's stay with the Williams and Son, right? And you take it away because people respond to fear and greed, right? And so they have the fear of loss. And so it will allow them to say, look, like, I mean, I just don't feel like you're engaged with us. It doesn't sound like you have a realistic desire to work with us. And then a lot of us say, oh, I'm sorry, let's reset to zero and let's sit down. And then they open up their minds and then you can have a start from scratch. And oftentimes that ability of keeping them, in check can help you a lot. It doesn't, obviously you can't use it all the time, but there are situations where, correctly played, it can really, it's a technique that can work incredibly, right? Refusing to participate.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with the takeaway. So
yeah.
So how do you stay updated on the latest trends and developments in sales and business, and how do you incorporate that into your coaching and teaching?
So, I mean, essentially, it's really a simple answer. I'm just really like a major geek, and I listen to podcasts. I listen to, YouTube videos, and they're not all business related. That obviously, when I'm driving around, heading to work, driving to clients, whatever, at least half the time I'm listening to something that's sort of industry related, and the other time I'm listening to sort of inane entertainment to keep me sane, right? But that's pretty much how I do it. I'm really kind of driven by how technology pulls business forward, like AI, and how can that be used. Obviously, lawyers are well engaged with AI right now with document prep and all sorts of things, and I highly recommend people, try to get and stay up on these trends because they're going to drive a huge shift in the way services are delivered, right? And so I'm just lucky that I'm kind of geeky and that's what I like. And, and so at the margin, oftentimes I'll pick something like that to listen to rather than, something else, right?
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. That's very similar to what I do. Are there any particular stories or case studies from your career or the book that you find particularly impactful that you'd like to share? And if you could spin it for lawyers, that would be ideal.
Yeah. So, well, one story that stands out sort of is about a client that was struggling to close deals, despite having excellent legal expertise. And, we worked together to refine the approach, focusing on relationship building and effective communication. And essentially, I guess, sort of in plain English, what was happening was the service provider, in this case the lawyer, right, was acting overly, was trying to establish rapport before it was appropriate, right? And so, and the rule that I kind of apply to it from the book is that implied familiarity also breeds contempt, right? So going back to the old rule my mom taught me, which was familiarity breeds contempt, I learned that this other rule of implied familiarity, so he was pretending like he knew the guy too well, right? And so what ended up happening was that, he was trying to establish a situation where the guy would go fishing with him or golfing with him or something like that. But that created a real highly charged negative reaction in the client, right? And because the client's saying, I'm not ready for that level of rapport with you. And you have to learn to take a step back, and you have to learn the way rapport is built naturally through building of trust, listening to the client, and having him have a genuine desire to want to move to a higher level of engagement with you, right? And I see that like a lot, right? People see pictures on the wall and they make these knee-jerk associations. Well, that picture's on his wall, so that means this, and I do that. And so they kind of jump to these conclusions rather than using it as a springboard to say, oh, what's the story behind that photo? Right? And then the guy can offer you whatever, whatever he wants to say about it, rather than being dragged down a path that he might not want to go, right? So that's kind of off on a tangent, but
it's good.
Yeah.
I often talk to attorneys about building know, like, and trust, and I think because someone filled out a form or a chatbot or called me ready, they downloaded some type of lead magnet off of Facebook or Instagram, and they think they're ready to come in for a consult, and you've got to nurture them along until they're ready. As I like to say, do you know when people are ready to buy?
Right.
When they're ready.
Yeah.
Right. Not when you're ready to sell them. So, but what are the actionable tips that you can offer, like real actionable things that you can offer attorneys who want to improve their conversion rate to be more successful?
So obviously I already touched on the follow-up, right? And so, that would be one. Again, trying to change your method of follow-up as well, right? So I always tell people, whenever possible, to try to make the first thing be a phone call. You might have sent some, you might have gotten their name through some method, so you got the lead or lead magnet. The first thing I always try to do, is to call that person, and then I always leave a voicemail, right? And so people are like, why do you always leave a voicemail? I'm like, because if you keep calling the guy and he's busy and he says your number, he will mentally program that number, and he'll see that you keep dialing and not leaving a message, and he's going to think you're a stalker, right? And so so always leave a voicemail that's 20 to 30 seconds. Right? When you're trying to convert the voicemail into action, then what I do is in that 20 to 30 seconds, don't waste it on inane pleasantries, right? Where I explain about, the thing that drives me crazy, because in my business, a lot of salesmen call me about my company to buy things from them, right? And so I get a lot of sales calls, right? And they start off the call and they're like, oh, hi, Glenn, this is Glenn, this is Bob from Acme Distributing or whatever, and how are you doing today? And I'm like, by this point, I'm already upset, right? Because he's just slow talking me, right? I'm like, oh, I'm fine, thanks. How are you? And of course, my mom says, oh, because that's the way my mom taught me to be polite. And he's like, oh, I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for asking me, right? And I'm like, I really don't care. Like, I just said that because that's what my mom said I have to say. And really what I want you to say is, hey, Glenn, it's Bob from Acme. We've been saving people, up to 20 to 30% on their document storage, solutions. I'd love to get 15 minutes on your calendar to go over this, this new solution we've got. Is that something you might be interested in? And I, if he gets me on the phone, say it like that and just get it all out in one sentence, right? Or just say, hey, hey, Glenn, it's Bob. from Acme. This is a cold call. We do document storage, whatever. We've got some great solutions. Love to get 20 minutes, or you can feel free to hang up. A lot of guys, okay, you got 20 seconds, right? And again, on the voicemail, the 20, 30-second voicemail, if he doesn't pick up, I say, it's Glenn from Acme, da-da-da-da-da. I'd love to get 15 minutes. I'm going to send you a follow-up email. Have a nice day. Bye. Click, right? Why is it 20 seconds? Because if it's less than 20, a lot of times people feel that it's just not a call that doesn't matter. It's an unknown number, whatever. It's probably not coming up on caller ID. It's a few seconds long. I just delete those, right? But when I see a message that's 20 to 30 seconds, I'm like, okay, somebody left me a 30-second message or something in there. So I'm tending to listen to it. So then he listens to the voicemail. He hears me. It's Glenn. Then he sees the voicemail. Then he sees the email, right? And so I will do that a couple of times, that iteration, voicemail, phone him, voicemail, email, etc. And then what I'll do is I'll try to call his assistant, coworker, or someone in his direct tangents, that I try to get through LinkedIn in order to, get their attention, right? Like, I'm not going to barrage the guy over and over again with my phone calls. I'll switch it up and I'll call other people in his department and see if I can get their attention. Or I will try to get a recommendation from a, 1 degree of separation, a different department in their building, or maybe a different company that's related or something. Like, hey, do you know Jack over at this company? And, I'll look at LinkedIn and things like that and try to find a 1 degree of separation relationship that I can use to convert him to, at least to getting his mind share to listen to me, right? And
takeaway that I'm hearing for lawyers is that if you've got a lead that comes in and you call back and you don't get an answer, they should really have a pre-scripted 20 to 30 second for that lead. Because what we find happens is that if they don't get someone on the phone and they leave a message, meaning the potential client, it's a PNC, potential new client, what happens is they call the next person on the list of Google.
Right.
So it's really important to get if you can't answer the phone, to get back to them as quickly as possible. And if you get their voicemail, to leave a compelling 20 to 30 second message that's going to prompt them to call you back again.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I mean, different firms use different tools. Like, some use Salesforce, some use HubSpot. I'm sure there's a legal CRM, that all allow you to do some of these patterns, right? Like in my system, I can record the call and then I can quickly do the 1-day email follow-up thing. And it's a template. It takes me 2 seconds to tweak it. I hit send. It gives me a tickler in 3 days, pops up, and I don't have to do anything. And it all just sort of happens automatically. And, and obviously I'm trying to qualify these people as being, if they're genuinely potentially real, right? Like, is the company appropriate? Is the person in that company appropriate? Are they on LinkedIn? Can I see them in the public, world? And, because I'm trying not to waste my time too. Right. And, And so you're saying about conversions and just, some of the other, to me, about converting deals, it's more about, having the customer want to deal with you. And I call that being a pleasure to do business with. Right. And so one of the other golden rules I have is never forget a face. Right. And so when I visit a client, like, let's say you are their lawyer and you go to their office to meet with them, and you're going to meet 3 or 4 people, right? And you're going to write those names down and you're going to put them in your CRM. And remember, you're not allowed to sit in the lobby when you're waiting for your meeting. So sit in your car, bring up your phone, go to your contact for that firm, call up the 4 names, and do what I call re-remembering their face. And so, there's Bob, Sally, George, and Paul, right? And you want to say, oh yeah, Sally, that's that tall lady, Bill's the bald guy, whatever. And make so it's like instantly recalled, because the problem is when you're in the office, Sally's going to walk in and like distract you right out of the bed. She's going to say, hey, Glenn, how's it going? And my brain has to go back into here to find her name. And the time it takes to go back and come forward, she already thinks I didn't know her name. Right. And she's mad at me now. She doesn't like me. Whereas the other way around, I've already remembered it out in the car when I wasn't sitting in the lobby. I come in and I see her and I'm like, hey, Sally, hey, Bob, hey, George, right? And it makes a huge difference, because they're like, oh my God, this guy remembers everybody. Like, he's such a pleasure to do business with, right?
Okay, now it's time for our lightning round. Glenn, this is where people get to know, like, and trust you. I'm just going to fire off some questions at you and just answer them as the answers come to your mind. So,
Sure.
first question is, what never fails to make you laugh?
I guess probably a good comedy movie or maybe a witty joke or something like that.
Okay. Best compliment you ever got?
That my coaching transformed someone's career significantly.
I love it. Person you'd trade places with for a day?
Probably Elon Musk, to get a glimpse of his crazy mindset and challenges in his life.
Yeah, that's mine too.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Your guilty pleasure?
Well, probably eating candy and watching action movies.
The biggest risk you ever took?
Quitting my job without notice and forgetting to tell my wife of 6 days that I quit my job to start my first business.
Great way to start a marriage.
For sure.
Worst piece of advice you ever got?
Stick to what you know. I mean, I think sometimes it's better, stepping out of your comfort zone has made huge leaps of growth for me,
What do you wish you were better at dealing with?
Probably delegating tasks and not being a control freak, I guess. Yeah.
So what's the one thing that you would like to change about yourself?
To be more patient and to maybe slow down and take things a bit slower.
And what are you most passionate about?
Helping others achieve their potential and watching them succeed.
Love that answer. So tell us something that most people don't know about you.
Two things. One, I'm a charity DJ. So since I was a teenager, I've been DJing, and I still DJ. I do it for charities. Just for the cost of the rental of my equipment and insurance and gas and things like that. I don't do it for free, but I do it for to cover those base costs. My time and stuff like that is free, and I love it. And so any kind of charitable organization, churches, things like that need a DJ. And believe me, once they know you're free, your name spreads very quickly. I don't have to advertise for that, let me tell you. And I guess the other thing people don't know about me is that, when I was younger, I was a professional, not for money, but sort of a professional level roller dance and figure skater. So on roller skates in the late 70s and early 80s, I was doing competitive roller dancing. I traveled around the Northeast U.S. and Canada doing that. And people are often very shocked to hear that about me.
Fun. Yeah, fun. So can you tell our listeners what's the best way for them to contact you?
Best way would be you can go to see me on LinkedIn, just my name, Glenn Poulos, and also my website is glennpoulos.com, which links to all my social media and my book and all that stuff. But LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me and have a conversation.
Great. So that's a wrap for today. This is Josh Konigsberg, your host of Behind the Bench podcast. Much thanks to our guest today, Glenn Poulos, author of Never Sit in the Lobby, and special thank you to our sponsor, Law Firm Marketing Pros, where they get you more leads, more clients, and more profits. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to another fabulous episode of Behind the Bench. I hope you take action on some insight and tips you learned today. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share.